Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the McConaughey at YouTube with the January 2020 Q&A session. I put out a call last week for any questions regarding matters of the hobby, my channel, or shout-outs, and I'm here to present the answers with research, personal experience, all that sort of thing. We'll get straight into it. Some of it's more comments than anything else, and we'll put some backstory. Rest are definitely fleshed out questions. Plastic Oddities by Tristan. That's amazing news about Japan. Looking forward to your content. Now what the plan is, I'm going to be traveling to Tokyo for a few weeks and a week and a half to Osaka between the 7th to 24th of February. The 9th of February in Chiba is the Winter Wonder Festival, which is one of the world's largest modelling events for smaller independent figurative and character scale model creations, mostly in resin. And it's an opportunity for major manufacturers to sponsor and show off their wares and upcoming wares, as well as smaller sculptors and studios to put their items on the table, sell them, self-promote, all that sort of thing. All the hobby media come in. The only thing that's really bigger than this is the Shara C4 Hobby Expo, Nuremberg, as well as Shizuoka. Those are more industry related ones. This is definitely ground roots, community based. A lot of characters do depict anime girls with large titties, something I'm definitely into, but it's very copyright heavy, and there are rumours about it being a free pass where you can almost sell anything, but on the opposite, it's actually very strict. And what happens is all the manufacturers and copyright holders for anime and other shows put it all out on the table and put out just event-only licenses to sell products if it meets their demands of not being too lewd or outside of canon or grotesque or outside of the scope of what they see as a quality product. So you would go over there watching a sculptor build on Twitter or whatnot, make a resin figure, 3D print it or cast it, and you have an opportunity to buy it at that event and that event only. And what happens is a lot of scalpers will come to the event, buy up all the popular figures and sell them on eBay and Amazon at a premium price. I admit with the salt mines, this is also my intention, though I'm also looking at buying a few projects for myself to cover on this YouTube channel and buying on behalf of other people for a very reasonable fee who also contributes to the community. Outside of anime characters, there's also things like transforming or robots and more alive monsters, Godzilla, and having a look at other smaller stalls as an adult division. I've seen a couple of armor and Gundams and stuff, but not very heavily focused upon some plastic models, but not being sure what I'm actually getting myself into, because I know it's a massive scope and it's something I've always wanted to get into and visit for many years for my sake. I'm going to learn about it, and I'll be talking about shortly who I'll be touring with, who are veterans, and will be helping me on the day to make the video and as well as buy stuff. The fact that this is just a giant event with hundreds of thousands of people rocking up, or tens of thousands, and thousands of stalls. The majority of people there are very talented and know how to work with resin and airbrush flesh tones and all that sort of thing. So it's just going to be packed of whoever's someone in modelling will be there. So it's going to blow my mind. I'm super excited. It's going to be a next big huge step in the hobby for me, in experiencing something from the first time I've gone to a hobby show and the first time I've gone to Japan. Next one, Robot Adventures. See you when you come over. Robot Adventures is a YouTube channel that reviews and plays with Transformers in an adult-orientated comedic manner. It's absolutely hilarious. It's worth sampling and checking out if it's your taste of humour. Ruben also is into music, video gaming, modelling and creating art, 3D printing. He sort of tries his hands at everything in a creative pursuit and puts a comedic twist to it. He's actually very talented and would love to see him do more building stuff. I actually watch very few creative YouTube stuff, not to influence what I'm doing, and mostly as a time restraint, but if he was building another Gundam and airbrushing it, I would line up to definitely watch that. So it'll be him I'll be touring the event with, making the video, and Japanese Sandman, which is a very old channel by a fella also living in Japan, who's obsessed with the Gundam Cubele from Zeta and Double Zeta Gundam, and it's the only thing he builds and reviews. Unfortunately, he hasn't made a video for a long time, but he's still deeply obsessed and loves that mobile suit. I think there might be a couple of other social media and YouTuber builders that will be with us for the day, and we'll go drinking and stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun hanging out with these guys. But in the links down below will be links to Robot Adventures and Japanese Sandman to check out their videos. Small channels, but their content is absolutely excellent. Bit of a shout out question. I've set up a Twitter page and I'll be putting work up there, and I've just been blown away with the amount of foreign Gundam and resin modelers, mostly from Japan, other parts of the Asian world. The sheer talent and the sheer content out there is absolutely awesome. So I'm planning to spend more time on Twitter and receiving questions and communications there. The Weathering Pig has a YouTube channel as well as a Twitter, and puts out weathered, well painted, well curated builds. Very worthwhile checking out. Getting into his question, what are some good modelling events to attend in Australia? I enjoy how you display some local stuff. I've got a bit of a background in events, and thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoy watching the videos, or at least how I interact with the events. I have my foot in the event industry. I won't get into that much, but I'm able to utilise those skills with the hobby and contribute to modelling events. Now, events that are worthwhile going to Australia, if you're travelling to Australia, if you're within Australia, Melbourne, Victoria is the hobby capital of Australia. It's where most of the hobby shops are, where the sales go down according to the big wholesalers, manufacturers, as well as where the big important events are being hosted. And around June, on the Queen's birthday, every year for just God knows how many decades, is the Australian Model Expo, initially hosted by the IPMS, but it's a coalition of many different hobby clubs where they judge it in an IPMS manner, have club displays, tons of competition displays, traders demonstrations, free builds. It's this giant thing that's been building up over the years. It's a full community event. For more information about it, look at the Model Expo reviews I've done on this YouTube channel, but it's definitely worthwhile going. It's just the atmosphere of, you can almost talk to anyone on the floor when you're working out. Everyone there has the same interest in the hobby. There's a lot of rare and hard to get to stuff that can be bought. There's definitely overseas visitors coming to it. It's just one of those big events. It's the most important one in Australia, at least. The second one that I stick my foot in and I'm partially involved with, especially this year, is the Gunpla Builders World Cup, hosted by Bandai and Hobbyco. It's attached to an anime convention in Sydney called Smash. It's going to happen around July. It's much tinier. It's nowhere near as big. You might have about 100 entries, not several hundred. There's only one trader there, or major trader, a few other on the trading floor are part of the anime convention, but the sheer quality and artistic talent put into the builds is what's worth checking out, as well as the rest of the convention. This event is a big draw card due to the weight behind the prestige and the prize of winning the event, which you get free tickets to go to Japan and compete in the World Cup. So there's quite a bit of money thrown into that, and people would like to get that status and whatnot. It's not judged like a traditional event. It is a corporate thing where Bandai's putting their best interest forwards in selling kits and that sort of thing. So what is chosen to win and all that can always be very controversial. But in a way of just looking out for media online or visiting the event, it's worthwhile. Unfortunately, the Australian leg has not been publicised very well on YouTube or social media in the few years, and it's been a closed Australian community only thing, which I'm no longer involved in, and I don't really see what sort of quality or builds have been involved in that. So should be going this year to check it out and maybe compete. The rest are smaller events, under 100 people turning out, a few traders, and maybe 20 to 50 models on display. There's a whole host of them. Model Art Australia magazine and the social media group does curate and advertise what events are going on. The one I'll advise, which is again a Melbourne event, also attached to an anime convention, is the Animanga Con, which is normally around August, September, October. I don't remember which month it is this year. November 7th, so it's later on in the year. What makes this one special from all the other ones, which is very biased, is that I run the modelling gunpla side of it. The owner of the event is very generous and gives me resources and space to do my own thing, and I try to make it as an interesting modelling event as possible. And I try to open it to other aspects of pop culture and anime modelling as well, a bit of a touch of 3D printing, garage kits, figures, that sort of thing, and they're very supportive of that. So in the way of going to where it's a more of a hands-on modelling event, Animanga will be more obscure, more niche, and you'll be able to build at these events, meet people, socialise, enter the competition, buy kits, that sort of thing. So that is very worthwhile. Thank you for the question, Weathering Pig. Next one, Benzone, a regular contributor to the channel. What should I use to thin acrylic paints so I can airbrush a glaze or a gloss finish? For modelling term, glaze is more of a artistic term in figurative palettes or ceramics. Normal thinner, flow improver, transparent by MIG. Have a great time at Wonderfest. Thank you very much, Benzone. Now, the whole thing with MIG, Army Painter, all those brands are known as polyurethane paints. They operate differently to any other solvent paint, and they're generally the hardest to put through an airbrush with issues of etching onto a surface. However, how they blend in the large collection of colours and being less toxic makes it a very attractive option, plus being the easiest paint to hand paint in shading and whatnot. Now, traditionally with polyurethane paints, what a lot of the major professional and league figurative painters will blend colours and shade in a way where they will have colour gradient look, metallic sheens, the effects of gloss and light through the application of multiple matte paints. So they try to add that aspect through hand painting, and it's something that not everyone can do, but it's traditionally not been the best medium to get that wet look gloss. However, with new tools and products on the market, that is definitely a big game changer with a lot of the new products that are just hitting. One thing to definitely notice with polyurethanes is you should always only use their indigenous products of thinner, flow improvers, or cleaners, all that sort of stuff in the airbrush, and if you can afford it, have an airbrush only for polyurethanes and another airbrush for lacquers and acrylics and enamels and all that sort of thing. The slightest cross-contamination will turn the paint into jelly. Now, a few terminologies going into your question. Flow improver is pretty much a fancy term for retardant. It slows down the drying rate of the paint. Your paint mix should not be any more than 10% flow improver to slow down the drying time so it's not drying in your nozzle. Should be about 50-50 equal mix, or any therefore ratio between the thinner and the paint. Thinner has a very strange, almost oily consistency, so it's definitely a special product, and it works great for an airbrush. The short stints I've used a medium, it's not too hard. If you use a wider needle nozzle combination on your airbrush, it's well kept and there's no cross contaminations. So yeah, flow improver is just retardant. Also, if you want to have a really strong gloss effect, what I've done on a few Gundams that way is I did all of my Vallejo painting shading, and then I'll use a different medium to build up the gloss. You could either use Tamir or Gunzi acrylic based gloss on top without dissolving the layer underneath, and that has a very strong punchy sheen to it. It also has stronger durability. Another thing that's a very old-fashioned technique modelers used to use a long time ago is floor polish, future floor, long life, that sort of thing. Cutting it with methylated spirits that airbrushes well or hand paints very well, and has a deep sheen with the amount of layers that you apply. They're a bit different to use than standard paint, so a little care should be taken, but generally in today's era of properly formulated top coats, they're not as popular, but a very cheap option, especially if you have access to that. And by AK, a player in the polyurethane world, this product was demonstrated to me at Metro Hobbies in the city. Thank you for making me aware of this. This is a 2K style paint, or you've got two-part glosses that are very popular now. You've got 3 mixtures by the Ultra Gloss varnish. You mix these 3 mixtures and you get that ultra wet look, super glaze glossy look, which used to be not achievable with polyurethanes. This product will get that a lot easier, as well as the floor polish in many layers. You talked about the transparents, but the transparents is more like a candy thing. You're not going to get the traditional candy effect like you would for lacquers, where you put a metallic candy and you get that ultra metallic look. But candies are also used for staining, colouring and shading. You might have a surface that's one colour, and if you're weathering it, you'll build up yellows and browns and stuff for a weathering look, or flesh tone, you'll build up red and oranges for blush. That's that effect. It's not so much a gloss or matte thing. The thing with matte and glosses is it's more of a gradient than it's just wet gloss look or a dead matte. There's just a whole variety of them, from semi-gloss, satin, all that sort of thing, and each type of paint has their advantages and disadvantages, and generally your super wet look glosses are the best achieved through lacquers, and enamels have the best satin looks, and generally the mattes were always well achieved with the acrylics. So you've got a few options there. That's building up the polyurethane glosses using the Ultra 2K gloss kit, using floor polish, or using alcohol based on top of it. Probably test it on spoons. It's always a riskier thing, but it's just something that traditionally was not achievable with polyurethanes, but it is now, and definitely worth giving it a go. Tim, a long-time friend of the channel. Hi Alan, hope you are doing well, as does the Salt Mines Hobby Shop. Thank you Tim, it is doing absolutely well. First, I would like to share some information. If you would remember, I had some trouble in the past with spraying Alclad 2 clear paints. I do remember that. They are generally more troublesome through clogging and causing other issues. It's a very old type of paint. It was the top of the industry a few decades ago. It's a bit more obsolete now comparing to the new mixtures on the market. Thinning them wasn't working either for me. As the years progressed, I came to find out thinning other paints in the airbrush wasn't working either. The airbrush always seemed to clog up on me. I was using the Wave 0.3, 0.5 airbrush. I've got the same airbrush. I've not reviewed it yet, but it's an excellent piece. We'll talk about it a bit later. The interchangeable nozzle of this airbrush is rather large, about 1 centimetre long and a diameter of 5 centimetres. I'll show a picture of that shortly. Even when dumping the thinner agent in first, it clogged up. As a paint is heavier than thinning agent, all the paint accumulates into the large nozzle with almost no way of mixing the two by method of back flushing. Hope this information will reach those using such an airbrush setup. Generally the best way always for heavier pigments is, and I normally do this with metallics or priming, is I'll mix it externally with thinner, stir it up, shake it up, then pour it into the airbrush. Also eventually over time the bigger pigments and lint and crap will build up behind the nozzle. That's why it's good to remove the nozzle and clean out the lint quite regularly. But just some airbrushes definitely do struggle depending on the pigment density of whatever medium you're spraying, and for some reason Alclad has always been very troublesome with that and leaving a few pigments behind to give you trouble with other paints. Now this is a picture of the Wave HT481. Either this or there's an older one that has generally the same internals. It looks very similar to a H&S. It has an aluminium body. They're very light. The needle and nozzle are more heavy duty. The needle and nozzles in this picture are completely independent in its own design. It's not really compatible with Hysing or Iwata or anything. A friend of mine that also used it bought a cheap Hysing needle, jammed it into the nozzle and completely split and ruined the nozzle. So they need their own parts, and the terrible thing about the Wave one is getting the extra parts is a bit of a pain. HobbyLink Japan doesn't do it anymore. The easiest way is through import from Japan from an agent, or when you're visiting over there if you've got a friend there. Yodobashi Camera or Volk's Hobby Shop does stock the parts still. If you got someone who knows Japanese, can walk in and ask for it. That's the easiest way. If you get a chance to get parts, buy up as many as you can, and you're generally good to go. Besides that, it's a beautiful airbrush. I thoroughly enjoyed using mine a few times. My friend who used his to death generally loved it until he moved on to his next airbrush. It would be worth salvaging and figuring out how to get it back in order. As for my question, the back seal of my trusty airbrush leaks like a fanboy at a K-pop meet. I remember the handshake story. I remember that. I thought it was a Japanese Idol one, but whatever. It probably happens multiple times. Funds are rather tight at the moment, so I had to get a cheap one to get by. Getting a workhorse is always recommended to put your finer airbrush for shading and better work later. I wouldn't be putting primers or Alclad clears through my top airbrush either. The nozzle and needle that came with the brush are fine. The nozzle provided with a larger needle nozzle set is crooked. Being a guy who knows his clones, maybe you know which one is a copy from, so I can get the original replacement parts. The airbrush is a Fengara BD 180, which I probably mispronounced, doesn't matter. Sorry for the life story, as always, just trying to be as detailed as possible. Not at all, man. The more information the better. Thank you for advance and good luck with all. So generally the part that is behind the trigger is the needle set O-ring, and most of the time it's always a white Teflon looking piece or a really plump fat rubber O-ring, and it sits behind this circular screw with a flathead cutout. You put a flathead electrical screwdriver down the back of your airbrush, screw it out, and you can take the Teflon needle seal out. Generally, I've found from a few airbrushes I pull apart, this part is universal. It's almost the same from airbrush to airbrush, so it's just easy to acquire. They don't wear out very often. What might be worthwhile doing to get your good airbrush back and working is taking the worn one out and seeing it's exactly the same as your cheap clone one, and just do a swapsy-roo and get your wave up and running. In the way of your clone airbrush, it's pretty much the same pattern as Iwata. It's not a bad airbrush. I'm not a big fan of this pattern. I don't like the fact that the crown can come off totally, exposing an O-ring, and the flow adjuster underneath the paint cup. But each to their own. I know many other people do thoroughly enjoy it. The needle and nozzles that are completely compatible with it is the same as the Hyacinth and Iwata's. So these needle nozzle sets that you can buy off eBay and Amazon very cheaply work absolutely beautifully. You can polish the needle a bit if you want. So they just screw in, as well as the set standard Iwata needles and nozzles. In the way of asking questions, adding a bunch of detail, following up from previous episodes, that's what this Q&A session is all about. And Ben, I much appreciate the amount of detail you go in. It gives a lot of information and backwards and forwards and experimenting for the viewers to look into, as well as informing ourselves and growing as a community in playing around with airbrushing and all of that sort of thing. In conclusion, that generally ends our Q&A session. It's, as usual, just heavily set straight into airbrushing and Vallejo. It always goes back to Vallejo. I think I might have to paint another Gundam or two with some AK paints just to brush off those skills and show off that I can still do it, I suppose. In the way of the Wave airbrush, I'm going to dust off my old one and do a review of it. I think it is a great airbrush, and people should generally be aware of it and consider buying it. If you go overseas to Japan to buy tools and a bunch of stuff, do remember to pick up a couple of needles and nozzles that will last the rest of its life. It's a little more beefier than the wider nozzles, so they'll last a lot longer if you're careful with it, and if you use a cheaper airbrush as your workhorse for all the nastier paints. That concludes everything. Thank you very much for watching. Bit of a reminder, in the description section down below for every video I have a link to all the different social medias that I'm involved with, generally on Facebook, Twitter, all that sort of thing. Some of the work in progresses, finished models, to and froms I will post there. I take photos as I build models, build up a file, and the video may not necessarily be made for many months down the road, sometimes up to a year, so you can see the model and anticipate the build video coming up, as well as events that I might frequent. If I'm putting anything out, I want to be a lot more active on Twitter. I find that to be an awesome platform. Really enjoying that a lot more than Facebook. I should have made the jump many years ago. And I also intend to jump on to Instagram, which I hear is an amazing community over there. And obviously I also have a gallery on Pinterest that's great for collecting awesome pictures of Japanese and overseas models. And if only you feel inclined, never pushing this, I have a Patreon, and that's going to tooling up to make my own model kits and designs, and putting out 3D printing designs, fleshing out the studio, and making this thing a real thing, and going part-time as a professional modeler to put out more content and just be more involved and build more complex models. It's the dream. I definitely do well enough to look after myself, but a little extra help never really hurts here and there. Again, only if you're inclined. That's pretty much a wrap up of everything that's going on. When I'm going to Japan in February, I have managed to edit enough videos where every week a video will drop on this channel for you to watch. And sometime early March I will make a couple of videos, a review of Wonderfest Festival, as well as a travel vlog of what I bought, what I've seen, what I've done in Japan, and probably a cool build during the process. Later on in the year, around June, July, is when the event season is on, and I'll be covering reviews of the big modelling events, and that will also be roughly when the salt mines will open. During the construction of the shop, I will document that and turn that into some sort of vlog, work in progress, video documentation thing, sort of like the time I worked in Gundams Plus for a week, so that should be a lot of fun. Thank you again, and catch you guys next time. We'll do one of these in a month's or so time. See you later.
Заебал мямлить, нихуя не понял.